Hello everybody. I'm going to ask you to be quiet because we will start in a few moments. So please be seated for those who can, and the session will start very soon. Thank you.
Welcome everybody to this launch of the For the People think tank, and hope you hear me. We are very pleased to see so many for our launch event, and I will pass to welcome to our co-chairs. We have Lee Anderson, who is one of the co-chairs. She is former Minister of Education and leader of the Sinistra in Finland, sorry for the pronunciation, and also MEP at the moment. And you will present the organization, please.
Thank you very much. So, friends, I want to very warmly welcome you and start by why we all are here. We are here because we are living in a time when the world is moving towards authoritarianism and fascism once again. We are living in a time when wealth is accumulating at a never-before-seen pace. We are living in a time when private tech giants are exercising an unprecedented influence on the information environments that all of our societies are dependent on, and in which our democracies are trying to stay alive. Even the worst crimes against humanity are carried out with impunity, while violations of human rights and international law are met with silence and with complicity. Furthermore, we are living in a time when liberal elites have failed to respond to the social crisis that the rising cost of living has created. They choose not to understand that countering this rise of fascism requires an economic program that can restore people's belief that a change for the better is possible. My name is Lee Anderson, and as you heard, I'm one of the two co-directors of this newly founded think tank, and you're all very welcome to the launch event of For the People. As the name suggests, the need for policies and for political programs that are based on principles of sovereignty, justice, and dignity are urgent. For us to be able to counter the politics of silence, the politics of submission, and the politics of complicity, we need new ideas, we need skills, and we need ways to mobilize around them. And that is exactly what we want to focus on in For the People. New ideas and new policy proposals are desperately needed as we are witnessing how Europe and the EU are completely lacking strategy and direction in the ongoing geopolitical turmoil and the changing political landscape. Faced with increasing industrial competition from both China and the US, Europe is reverting to decades-old neoliberal mantras about deregulation for big business. Faced with a potential global economic disaster due to the illegal war in Iran and sharp increase in commodity prices, Europe recommends Europeans to just fly a bit less. And faced with Trump's offer of zero tariffs for US goods and tariffs for European goods, Europe responds by saying, well, yes, and promising to buy even more weapons and even more fossil fuels. And faced with an ongoing genocide and war crimes of a gravity and a scale unseen for decades, Europe's response is silence. All of these examples shows that change and new ideas are urgently needed. We have entered into a new era in global politics, an era where you have to be able to understand the ideological dimensions of geopolitics in order to understand what is happening and how to formulate an anti-fascist and anti-imperialist response. Great powers acting in their own interest without any respect for international law is of course nothing new. We have seen time and time again how big countries interfere in domestic politics, in elections, elsewhere. And we know already that they are ready to attack and act against the most fundamental rules of international law because they are convinced and they know that they can do so without consequence. For many decades, these actions were silently approved or carried out by so-called liberal leaders. And they were, throughout decades, motivated by slogans about democracy and freedom, and many times by pompous words about the rules-based order. I argue that now, with the rise of leaders such as Trump, Putin, Netanyahu, and Orban, the masks are off. They do not need hollow slogans about rules-based order, democracy, or freedom, as these leaders openly defy the rules. They openly represent a worldview where power and size gives you the right to do whatever you want. These authoritarian leaders share an ideology of modern-day fascism, using conventional and unconventional warfare to advance their political interests and resource imperialism. And they are also united by their despise for diversity. The danger their ideology poses for all of us is already clear. They have shown a willingness to attack not just other sovereign countries, but also domestic political opponents and minorities, even using lethal violence. They have shown willingness to restrict the role of the free media, of trade unions, and to go after democratic and legal institutions. These current developments need to be countered through building a bold, progressive program of our own, by learning and getting inspiration from each other, and through creating a broad political space in which we can do this work together. Our job is to define the role Europe should play in the world at this crucial juncture in time. We must fight for justice at a time when a few powerful men think that they can do whatever they like. We must stand up for dignity at a time when both capitalists and imperialists think they can force people into submission. And we must also act to protect our sovereignty, because without reducing the critical dependencies that Europe has, we will never be free to define our own policies and free to define our own role in the world. One of the most acute missions in this regard is to reduce our dependency on fossil fuels and to transform our economies. This dependency is a security emergency, it is an environmental emergency, but most of all, it is a social emergency. We need to address the negative social and economic implications that this dependency has for people. We have not yet recovered from the last cost of living crisis, largely caused by Putin's illegal full-scale war of aggression against Ukraine. That led us all to paying Putin's prices for energy, electricity, which pushed up the rents and prices for fertilizers and for food. The European Central Bank made matters worse by increasing interest rates, and real wages of the workers have still not recovered from the previous shock. We need to act on this now, when Trump's illegal war in Iran has led to a new disruption in the energy market, to Trump prices, that might result in a crisis that is worse than the energy crisis of the 70s and 2022 combined. This all comes together in why we are here. To be able to stop these authoritarian developments, we need to understand how economic and domestic policy is linked to geopolitics and foreign policy. The previous cost of living crisis lifted the far right, in some places even all the way to power. That shift is what has enabled the new era of resource imperialism, the complicitness in genocide, and the submission to trade extortion. If the same mistakes are repeated once again, the consequences can be even worse. That is why we need an ambitious program for sovereignty in energy, in data, in security, in our social models. And let me give you just a few short examples. We need, for example, windfall taxes to tax profits, to direct the funds to support those who need it and to free of charge collective transport, price caps for basic necessities, energy, and to reform EU fiscal rules to enable massive public investments in these transitions. We need European sovereign cloud services, we need wealth taxes to tax the ultra-rich, but most of all, we need a broad vision for a Europe that stands on its own feet, for an economic system that is built to serve the people instead of owners, a multilateral system founded on principles of dignity and justice, based on democratic self-determination, not on old colonial relationships and outdated, skewed power balances. And most of all, we need to learn how to mobilize to make these policies and these visions reality. That means learning from each other about what works and what does not, about successful examples of workers' mobilization and communication campaigns. For the People will be a forum for formulating responses to current developments and the world order. We believe in the importance of debate and developing ideas together, not in defining single right answers to complex problems. For the People is affiliated with the new European Party, the European Left Alliance for the People and the Planet, and currently has 5 political foundations as its members, as we just today actually approved more. Institut La Boétie from France, Esquerda Lab from Portugal, Instituto República y Democracia from Spain, Freedom Foundation from Poland, because I will not even attempt to pronounce the Polish name, and Vasemmistofoorum from Finland. And the doors are open for more members to join. You will hear more about the planned activities of and also of the people involved in this foundation during this event. So for now, I just want to wish all of you a warm welcome, and I hope that you leave from here with new ideas, new inspiration, and new contacts. Because all change starts with hope and optimism in our collective belief in the power that we have together. Thank you very much.
Okay. Thank you, Lee, for the introduction. If you want a tongue twister, the Freedom Foundation is actually Fundacja Wolności imienia Tadeusza Kościuszki. If you really want to practice in the break, be my guest. And now, moving into another tradition of the left, collective leadership. We have not one co-chair, we have 2 co-chairs. So please welcome Clémence Guettet, who is a member of parliament from La France Insoumise, and is the vice president of the National Assembly. Please, the floor is yours.
Bonjour à toutes et tous. I'm French, so I will speak French. It's like a political principle, so I'm sorry. Translation is available if you need it. C'est vraiment un très grand plaisir d'être avec vous aujourd'hui et merci parce que je sais que vous êtes venus de toute l'Europe pour être présents à cet événement de lancement. Je veux remercier, en complément de ce qu'a dit Lee en introduction, celles et ceux qui ont travaillé depuis des mois à faire en sorte que cette fondation voit le jour. Et cet événement voit le jour aussi avec un spécial remerciement pour Lee Anderson, qui est donc co-directrice à mes côtés, et Marissa Mathias, qui est au fond de la salle, coordinatrice de la fondation, qui a fait un énorme travail pour ça. Je veux remercier tous les intervenants qui vont intervenir dans l'après-midi, Cédric Durand, Isabella Weber, Todd Brogan, Dave Keating, et celles et ceux dont le travail politique finalement depuis des années nous a rendus forts en Europe et nous a permis d'avoir un parti, d'avoir une fondation aujourd'hui et donc un outil intellectuel internationaliste comme on s'en dote aujourd'hui. Je pense à celui avec qui je co-dirige l'Institut La Boétie en France, Jean-Luc Mélenchon, mais aussi aux autres dirigeants qui nous font l'honneur d'intervenir aujourd'hui, Katharina Martins, Otto Brun, José Manuel Pureza, Malin Björk, Zofia Malis, qui est ici. Bref, merci à toutes et tous d'être venus pour intervenir. Alors, on tient un événement aujourd'hui dans un contexte mondial qui est évidemment très particulier, très inquiétant aussi et incertain. Et donc, je veux profiter d'avoir la tribune et je pense en notre nom à toutes et tous pour commencer cette intervention, pour dire notre solidarité totale avec tous les peuples qui sont bombardés, massacrés, qui vivent dans la peur aujourd'hui, et au peuple libanais qui en ce moment même est sous les bombes de Netanyahou.
Who's facing the bombs of Netanyahu. In the current context, Israel and the United States of America are waging renewed imperialistic wars, colonialist wars. They're killing people in Lebanon, Palestine, Iran. They're violating international law on an everyday basis. They're attacking and carpet bombing those countries with the complicity of the Europeans who just remain silent and let do. So there's the association agreement between the EU and Israel. As long as this agreement stays, as long as European states will deliver military equipment to those wars, as long as our leaders deny the genocide in Palestine, we will not remain silent. The peoples who are the victims of the supremacists should know that in Europe, we are resisting. We are denouncing what they're doing, and we're trying to build strong alliances to make this front of opposition against imperialists. Today, we are seeing regional wars becoming global wars. The economy is refocused on the war economy to serve the conflict. We are facing the fascism trends in all our policies, and we see a speed up in climate change at the same time. So today's event is so important because we should not be just stuck by fear. We are here to look into the future and change it. So first, ladies and gentlemen, this afternoon we'll try to understand how the system works, which are the main features of this supremacist system, as we call it in France. So we see that most imperialists are very active, power is concentrated in the hands of a few, and it is the economy which is becoming very individualistic. This economy is supported by fear, hatred, racism, Islamophobia, and so on. Current policies only strengthen this rationale. This is a vicious circle which has an impact on the common good and public services which are being sold and traded. Current mechanisms for mutual help and aid are being dismantled. These masters of the world want to get rid of social security and the welfare state or the sovereignty of the people. We have this observation, I think we can agree on that, is that the past solutions are no longer enough to take up the challenges of today and tomorrow. The social democrat neoliberal response to that, Lee mentioned it, makes us believe that we can have advantages for the workers in that system. It's not working. It's not working. It's not enabling us to face this monster of today's capitalism. It's not able to meet climate change challenges, which is even getting worse in the future. So we want a new approach, which is that of walking away from that system to meet with the challenge of today. And we need to speak about it right away. Ladies and gentlemen, we have a huge task ahead of us. We need to implement a consistent strategy. We need to be ambitious in this context, which is a context where the media and the political landscape is becoming far right. So it's an absolute need, an urgent emergency for us to take action. In 2024, we've prevented Rassemblement National from taking power in France. So we're here to fight fascists across Europe. A few weeks ago, the Italian people questioned the referendum proposed by Meloni. She wanted to end the independence of the justice system. Reversely, across Europe, where the center left is taking right-wing positions on immigration, we see that far right is increasing faster. So today, the European continent is at a crossroads. Next year, the EU will adopt a new multi-annual budget and a new CAP, the Common Agricultural Policy. We'll have a new president next year in France. Italy will have a new parliament, just like France. And it will be this year in Hungary and Sweden. And in spite of within these crises, geopolitical crises, environmental crises, an upcoming economic crisis, there's a way for the left to do something different with this continent. We're not just a good pupil for catastrophic capitalism or just a mere help to an empire which is fading down, i.e. the US. So we are here to build sovereignty facing the empire while acting for peace, while walking away from colonialist approach, and we are going to work beyond the mercantile rationale. This requires a lot of work, and part of this work can be done by the foundation we're creating today. We need to be at the forefront with new ideas. We should not just follow declining neoliberal ideas. We should not be concerned by the ideological conquest of the far right. Let's move. Let's not remain immobile. Let's have our own narrative, our own solutions, our own solution for the environment. Sovereignty is the title of the day. Decolonialization, feminism, anti-racism, and of course taxation for the wealthiest. These words must be shared. These words must go from east to west, from north to south on the continent. This is why this venue we're creating today is so important. We are here to trigger a movement, trigger a new movement at the European level, at the international level, to fight the ideological war for our people. We are here to repeat ideas. We are here to renew intellectual weapons which are made available for the future. As you know, it might seem a bit far-fetched, but we have to face concrete questions right away. We want to work on social justice. It's a matter of life or death for many people. In France, but like in other countries, we need to produce notes, we organize study visits to understand everybody's reality. And many of us are facing increasing rent, more precariousness, families with children ending up on the street with the government supporting those policies. Many of us are facing more death on the workplace. More and more people die on the workplace in our countries. I'm referring here to these 50 people who died on the workplace since January. We are facing increasing prices for oil, and we depend on foreign oil. So many fellow citizens are facing difficulties because of the current crisis with multinational companies who are making so much money, and the government's help, financial help, is only contributing to the profit of these multinational companies. So we need to react. Back to a concept proposed by Isabella Weber, who spoke afterwards. We can create an anti-fascist economy which is governed by the need, which is at the service of the people, and we can oppose our adversaries, which are far-right and neoliberal people. We need to take over production with the state, really release ourselves from the short-term dictatorship visions. We need to share time, to give people more time outside work, to also take more time to plan on the long run for the environment, for energy. We need to end our dependency on oil. Next, we need to speak about the sovereignty of the people and the peoples, as it is the case today. It's pointless if we don't speak about the management of the networks that we need for our own existence. We will discuss that. We'll have to discuss that in upcoming events, because the giants of energy and technologies now control our human existence. So we need to fight their empire, to dismantle them. Not more locally, we just had local elections in France. We can take over management on water and waste. At the national level, we can renationalize the railway. And internationally speaking, we need to get rid of GAFAMs. We need to have a free, collective, digital space without these techno medieval leaders that Frederick is going to present. Cedric will present today. Then sovereignty of the people implies keeping common good, water, air, biodiversity and forests. All that is essential for human life. This must be monitored by the people and democratically. So these are the main guidelines for today. We need to work on the methods, on actions, mobilization. We don't want to speak to each other. We need to speak to the rest of the world. So it is of paramount importance that we have trade union representatives who speak, and they will speak today. We speak about social justice, environmental planification, sovereignty. All this will make sense if it comes from the people. People must get mobilized. So we are here also representing political parties. We believe that the elections are relevant, but the people cannot do anything if it's not moving with the entire society. You need to take it to the street, to the factories, and meet across the countries. With today's foundation, we need to endow ourselves with the necessary weapons, ideological weapons, for people supporting us. So long live the foundation for the people. Have a nice afternoon, everyone, and we are so pleased to have you with us today. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much. And then, before I give the floor to Isabella and Cedric, who can come up here, I will have to present my co-moderator, Philippe Chaudet. He is the member of the RACIM National Council, and we will be trying to get you through this day. I have a few housekeeping notes. Some of you signed when you arrived, and those who didn't will have the opportunity before you leave. And our colleague is having the sign-in sheet. Some asked for a quiet room. It's upstairs. And then we will proceed with the program. The first part is the Antifascist Economic and Digital Sovereignty and Ecological Planning. And please, Isabella Weber, the floor will be yours. And Isabella is a German economist and also have studied in the US, is with the Economists of Resistance. Please, the floor is yours, and you can elaborate on the presentation. Thank you.
Thank you so much for having me. I rushed here between caring for a 7-month-old baby and trying to finish a book because this seems incredibly urgent and incredibly important. Thank you so much for this initiative, and thank you so much for centering anti-fascist economics as a key element of your program. A basic contradiction between the rule of the people and the rule of the market makes neoliberal democracy vulnerable to the threat of fascism. We need an anti-fascist economics, an economics that addresses the material concerns of the people above everything else, that is grounded on dignity and humanity. The threat to democracy from the extreme right and fascist forces cannot be fended off by insisting on the procedural merits of democracy when these procedures have not delivered for the majority of people. From climate disasters, pandemics, obscene levels of inequality, and the meltdown of global institutions, we face a crisis that cannot be resolved within neoliberal capitalism. This makes people yearn for anything but the status quo. Fascism promises an alternative to the decadence of the present. Neoliberalism means locking us into this status quo, the status quo that gave rise to the crisis. It means the rule of the idea that there's no alternative, that when it comes to the economy, the material well-being of democratic representatives, when it comes to the material well-being of the people, the democratic representatives are incompetent. By creating this deadlock, neoliberalism paves the way for the rise of the extreme right. Governments addressed the 2009 financial crisis by bailing out the banks and not the people. This was the first tipping point in the rise of the extreme right. The inflation crisis was the second. When COVID-19 created an opportunity for corporations to push up prices while deepening the cost of living crisis amidst a global pandemic, too many democratic governments watched on the sidelines while being told by the vast majority of economists that there was nothing to be done against these price explosions, that this was just the laws of the market. Economists like myself, who insisted that it is the responsibility of governments to protect their people against profiteering, were ridiculed. The social contract under capitalism is supposed to be that workers go to work and earn a living in return. Already before inflation, too many workers around the world could barely survive on their wages. Now, workers kept doing their job, but the prices of essentials, housing, utilities, food, transportation, the stuff we cannot do without, shot up in ways that pushed them over the brink with no fault of their own. Working families could no longer afford the status quo, while corporations reaped literally record profits. This was not a coincidental outcome, it was a logical consequence of a system designed based on neoliberal economics. Neoliberal economics is constructed around the core principle that the best possible world is one of universal subordination to markets. In a neoliberal world, people are told at the same time, democracy is the highest form of political organization, and when it comes to the economy, the material foundation of our life, the best the representatives of the people can do is to subordinate their constituencies to the market. This second statement might sound like an exaggeration to some. In fact, it is textbook economics. Students literally learn that short of dropping a nuclear bomb, the second worst thing that can happen to a city is rent stabilization. A government that dares to make housing affordable for its constituencies is equated with killing of people and living spaces. This basic contradiction between the role of the people and the role of the market makes neoliberal democracy fragile, as I've argued. What it really means is that the strong hands of gigantic corporations are hidden behind the rhetoric of the invisible hand of the market. Corporate power is sidetracked in economic policy analysis. What parades as a rejection of market interventions means not intervening against the profit interests of corporations in the name of the interests of the majority of people, of workers, of groups deserving protection in a civilized society. Since the biggest beneficiaries of corporate profits are a tiny number of ultra-rich, this system fuels ever more obscene levels of inequality and ultimately creates an oligarchy incompatible with any serious notion of democracy. This system is founded on the impotence and incompetence of democratic governance, and as such is incapable of addressing the crisis we face. In too many countries, the far-right, even fascist forces have been able to exploit the deadlock we face. In a world of climate meltdown and a collapsing international order, they capture the masses of people whose living standards stagnated or crumbled, who are existentially frustrated with the present and have lost hope in a better future. They promise that they are actually the chosen people, that their race makes them superior to everyone else. They pretend to restore the dignity by degrading the humanity of others, of migrants, of blacks, of LGBTQ+, of non-Christians, of women, of anyone whose identity can be exploited to demarcate a difference to the allegedly chosen few. Instead of fighting for the survival of humanity on a literally burning planet, for a decent life for all people, they are happy to let the planet burn, to let millions of people die without access to aid and healthcare in the name of population control, as long as the chosen few can thrive behind walls, on islands, or even another planet of their own. We cannot afford to let this dystopia be the only dream for a different future, a real alternative to the status quo. We need an agenda of humanity instead of selection, of solidarity instead of imperialism, of democratic agency instead of defeatism, care instead of competition. But we cannot stop at slogans. On every level of governance, we need to spell out what economic alternatives to neoliberalism and the slippery slope to fascism can look like. How those alternatives address the crisis in concrete ways, speaking to the real challenges of ordinary people. And anti-fascist economics needs to deliver the most basic precondition for dignified life: access to essentials like food, housing, transportation, healthcare, and childcare. In a world of overlapping emergencies and shocks, the prices of essentials of life cannot be left vulnerable to extreme spikes. Saron Mamdani's campaign for an affordable city for all New Yorkers has shown the electoral promise of such a focus on essentials. Die Linke emerged like phoenix from the ashes with a campaign focused on knocking doors and focused on the prices of the essentials, the stuff that people cannot do without. President Scheinbaum has won in a landslide victory and demonstrated that in the face of an extreme energy and food price shocks, governments can act, even on the national level, even in the so-called periphery, to protect their people against price shocks in essentials and rein in against windfall profits. President Petro has shown the way on how to call out profiteering and sellers' inflation in a national campaign. Where shocks are global, like in food commodities and energy, we need global strategies. The crisis we are living through this very minute demonstrates the urgent necessity for preparedness. Multilateral buffer stocks that buy food commodities when prices collapse and sell when prices spike, thus balancing supply and demand, can be an important stabilizing mechanism in an age of climate change when shocks to agricultural yield are looming, and we see once more that war too is a shock that sends food prices spiraling. Brazil's public stockholding system, for example, is based on these principles and being re-strengthened as we speak by President Lula's government after it was depleted along with other key state institutions by Bolsonaro. In a time of escalating trade wars, buffer stocks present an urgently needed alternative to the binary of globalist free trade versus nationalist protectionism. Buffer stocks stand for the possibility of trade managed in the interests of the people. They stand for the possibility to organize multilateral public market power to loosen the stranglehold of a handful of corporations over the global trade in basic necessities like food. The illegal war on Iran is a wake-up call that affordability for the common people requires peace. It is not enough to shield rich country populations and let the rest of humanity starve. In this moment, this means first and foremost that Europe should not be complicit in this war. But Europe should not be a bystander to the global energy shock either. It should take the lead in coordinating a multilateral response to shield people against the fallout from this war. The ceasefire is already crumbling, but even if it was to last, commodity market experts project shortages of oil and other critical raw materials, importantly including fertilizers with major consequences for food, on global markets in the months to come. Commodity traders are losing their mind over the fallouts from the war. Their business is making profits from volatility, and this has been a moment of peak volatility. But they are terrified by the consequences for human livelihoods that exploding prices will bring about. Rationing by market prices in a global crisis like the one we face this very minute means the law of the jungle. Rich countries outbid poor countries, and rich people keep up their high energy use, while poorer people are priced out of essential energy needs. In recent years, this is the lesson of market allocation of critical medical supplies during the COVID-19 pandemic and of the 2022 energy crisis. But there is an alternative: rationing and pricing by design instead of by market panic. We need multilateral coordination to defend a price ceiling in global oil markets and to allocate scarce resources to guarantee essential needs and minimize the economic fallout. This might seem like a utopian proposition amidst the crisis of multilateralism. In fact, it is the kind of bold initiative urgently needed at a time when the world is being reordered. The EU should take the lead in establishing a multilateral institution that canalizes oil purchases. All countries should be welcome to join. it would be key to form an alliance with Asian partners and to show solidarity with the global South. If countries bundle their purchasing power, they can defend a price ceiling. This principle was already exercised by the European emergency gas price cap, even though implemented way too late to be effective. Allocation of oil could then proceed such that countries below a minimum threshold of GDP per capita would receive their whole pre-crisis import. Poor countries' share in global energy consumption is so low that the cost for rich countries is negligible. Middle-income countries and high-income countries would get a percentage share of their past imports. Such a scheme is not a new idea. It was successfully exercised for a range of allied countries during World War I. Instead of using public funds to pay outrageous prices and windfall profits, they should be used to make public transportation free and invest in low-cost, low-carbon alternatives with full force. And the kind of multilateral initiative that I have sketched would ensure that fiscal funds do not go into paying those absurd prices. Establishing a multilateral oil purchase and coordination mechanism would not only help in the present crisis, but would also be an institution building for future disaster preparedness. In the turbulent world we are living in, there will be more shocks to come. Taking leadership in such an initiative would not only be good economic policy for the EU, but would also be a key step for the Europeans to find a new role as a power for peace and solidarity amidst heightening superpower tensions. These are just some, I think, important examples of an emerging new economic paradigm. Of course, stable prices for essentials have to be complemented with a fight for decent wages and a fiscal policy dedicated to full employment. Taxes on multinational corporations and the rich are obviously necessary. The key is that the goals are determined democratically, and it is the job of economics and experts to help find ways to reach those goals, rather than to lecture the public that non-economists have no sense of judgment. Democratic agency needs to be the starting point. Markets and planning are tools of economic governance in the pursuit of such goals. They both have their place. Rejecting the subordination to markets does not mean rejecting markets per se. Bringing planning back does not mean reviving Soviet-style economic policy. For states to move beyond enforcing market subordination and towards facilitating democratically determined economic policy goals requires the rebuilding of state capacity and capacity of collective action like unions after years of aggressive destruction. Again, the essentials are key. In an age of overlapping emergencies, where the inhabitability on our planet is at stake, freeing the foundations of our material well-being from the exclusive reign of profits and reclaiming them in the public interest is a crucial step in restoring hope for a future worth fighting for. And hope cannot be sacrificed. Hope and charting escape routes from the present crisis are what we need to counter the extreme right who fuels the crisis to exploit the chaos for their dystopian project. I've rushed here, as I said, amidst finishing a book titled Anti-fascist Economics, dedicated just to this project. Your speeches give me hope that the foundation for the people can be an important driver in organizing an alternative that builds a reliable, concrete escape route from the deadlock we have reached. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Isabella, for your intervention. And now it is my pleasure, also as a researcher in computer science, to introduce Cédric Durand, who is going to talk about overaccumulation of AI.
Bonjour à toutes et à tous, un grand merci pour cette invitation. Je vais m'exprimer en...
Well, thank you very much. I would like to speak French, and my slides will be in English, so that it will be probably better or easier. Well, I think that we need to share ideas all over Europe with a view to build a space where we can defend our critical mind, our critical thoughts. And I think that the approach mentioned by Isabella is of the utmost importance for the future to come. My presentation will be completely different, but anyway, it is something quite complementary to what has been discussed previously. I would like to talk about artificial intelligence. We have the energy crisis, we have wars and conflicts, we have environmental issues as well as financial issues at stake. But artificial intelligence is also a very important element. And I hope I will give you some tools with a view to better read, if I may say so, the current situation. What do we mean by over-accumulation, and mainly the over-accumulation of capital? And David Harvey did refer to the capitalist's necessary passion for surplus value-producing technological change produces a surplus of capital relative to opportunities to employ that capital. So I think that is a kind of a contradiction between the surplus and value-producing technological element is at the very heart of my presentation. And I would like to refer to 7 bullet points. There is an AI bubble. There is a US-led AI boom. That's bullet point number 2. But there is no investment boom, and that's bullet point number 3. The process is transformative, and that's bullet point number 4. And point number 5, it's not yet profitable, it's not sustainable, and labor is in danger. Well, the AI bubble, to start with, item number 1. Well, that's a very good indicator of the AI financial mania. Since ChatGPT release in October 2022, we can see that the situation is not reasonable at all, far away from it. So we clearly have a bubble over there. What else? Well, we have some circular deals or financial arrangements which have been made. OpenAI is supported and supporting oracles, and there is a kind of financial circuit, with a kind of loop, as you can see here with NVIDIA, OpenAI, Oracle, Intel, etc. I've just given an example, but we have plenty of examples. In green, you have those which do produce chips. In red, you have AI service providers. And in blue, we have those active in the cloud. Well, that's a kind of circular approach. But we are told, well, that's true, there is a bubble, but bubbles are good. And I quote, and I think that people do consider that this time we would have a kind of industrial bubble as opposed to the financial bubble. And it's quite difficult to make a choice, a clear-cut choice between good and better ideas. And people do consider that from a material point of view, from the hardware point of view, we have US data center built out status by year of constructions or planning in gigawatts of capacity. So there is indeed something. But what is this something, if I may say so? And I would like to refer to the scope of this investment. We have in the United States the economy, which is deeply related to artificial intelligence. So we have AI-related investment and the AI-related investment contribution to GDP growth. And it is a main input to growth in the United States. So without those investments in AI, we would not have this kind of bubble. And the investment is mainly located in the United States. And it is something which is quite interesting regarding the EU sovereignty. Well, on the left, we have those advanced chips which are mostly US designed and are mostly deployed by US firms. But China is there. And from those who do own chips, mainly they are located in the United States, a little bit in China, but almost nothing at all in Europe. Mainly American companies are involved in the chip industry. So we need to bear in mind the fact that those chips are made by the United States. And we also have the most powerful data centers, which are US-based as well. In China, there is something which does exist, but the EU does not even appear in the landscape. And we have one single data center which will be built by Microsoft and does represent $100 million. So the figures are quite impressive. What about the model? So mainly the US and China. But China might have some advantage here, because what matters here is indeed the border. Most of the time, small AI models, which are fully operational, can be much more useful. And in that particular field, China has probably the best open source models, and they do manage to beat the US from that particular point of view. Well, that was related to the second bullet point. The third bullet point is related to the fact that there is no investment boom. There is a kind of AI investment, but it's not fit for purpose, because it is done in a way which is detrimental to other investments. And what you need to see here, that in red, we have computer facility construction, data center in yellow, and in white we have the chips. It's quite different from rails, for example, in the railway sector. So it's quite different. There is no boom of investment, and the investment rate in the US is on the decline. There is a kind of slowdown. There is a kind of gap between those different elements. Bullet point number 4, as I told you, is related to the fact that it is transformative. But it's quite difficult to have a kind of helicopter view, because AI is supposed to sell some dream to potential investors, but we need to talk about it because tangible things do happen. And just a figure of importance, most of AI is used for private reasons. 1/5 of workers do use AI on a regular basis at work. So we need to bear this in mind. Another point which is of importance is that there are many inequalities according to the different sectors. If you talk to people who are involved in coding, for example, they will tell you that what would take 30 minutes before will only take 5 minutes now with AI. But in other sectors, in call centers, marketing, the legal sector do develop a lot of things thanks to AI. But given that AI is not completely reliable, what is automated is indeed related to things which were outsourced before. If it is not strategic, AI is likely to come into the picture. And sometimes it is not completely visible. But what does require some cleaning, some operational models in countries like Madagascar, India, Maghreb countries, etc. We know that this part of artificial intelligence is still present, and we need to take into consideration the fact that it is not fully justified from an empirical point of view. Point number 5, it's not yet profitable, and it is quite amazing, and that's the kind of thing we need to bear in mind. Well, that's the OpenAI quarterly revenue extrapolated, of course. The income of OpenAI is not public, but what you can see in pink is the Microsoft revenue share. And you can see that the increase is quite impressive, but the costs do explode as well. And what you have, the blue dots over there, has to do with the cloud, the use of cloud services with a view to meet the request put forward by the users. So it means that every day they do spend the double of what they earn with a view to meet the needs of the different users. So it's not profitable at all. So what does it mean at the end of the day? It means that we cannot move like that or along these lines for 10 more years. What might happen, and it might have an impact on the EU. The invoice will increase, and therefore we might be dependent from an economic point of view. There is something, there is a challenge of that kind which has to be taken into consideration. And then those using AI, what you can see on the left is what you hope to get, i.e. to make an awful lot of money. They think it will help to reduce costs, to improve the relationships with the client, etc. And they hope it will take place. There will be an improvement, but it will never happen. In the United States, 95% of organizations which have invested massively in AI have not seen a positive impact on their income. So it does not allow them to make money. Of course, we can see what's going on. If you do use AI, things work better, but there is no possibility to make profit out of it. Bullet point number 6 has to do with the fact that it is not sustainable. Why? Well, as I said a while ago, it's quite different from the railway sector. It's quite different here with AI. Sometimes people tend to consider that investments in chips might be exactly identical to what is being done in a different sector. But it's quite difficult to maintain the stock because they can become obsolete after a short period of time. And there is no guarantee at all. One possibility, one assumption would be the following. It would become more and more expensive, and therefore it would not be possible anymore to further deploy this type of approach.
Et les chiffres du point de vue de la consommation,
And it's not sustainable because when you see the figures, it's just mind-striking. We are at the full consumption level of the state of New York for AI worldwide. So consumption is so high and it keeps increasing, so it's not sustainable from an environmental viewpoint, and many people are opposing that. If you look what happened in Ireland, where people are opposing data centers, also in the US when it comes to access of the land, to the land. So there's a conflict for resources around AI, and the left has to invest into that, commit itself into that. Now, they want to keep up the hype, like data centers in space. Come on, even them don't know what to do because they will get stuck when it comes to developing AI with the energy limits. Because the data centers in space are not working. I'm not going to give you reasons why, but we know why it's not working. Now, there's something which is not being discussed, but it's still important. There's a huge pressure on the usage of chips, microchips. All these chips used for AI are not used for other purposes, and the scarcity appearing in other sectors. Inflation is impacted and comes from the increase of prices of chips, microchips, because of the AI usage. So shortages will increase. Lastly, labor. Labor is in danger. Why? Well, they are saying it. There's this class war, war of the classes. This is a declaration by the CEO of Palantir a few days ago. He says that his technology is going to disrupt humanities, those who have been trained in humanities, those voting for the Democrats in the US, and especially women. So all these people will be fragilized economically speaking, but because their work will be automated, but will work more with the middle class, which is not being automated. This is also the argument of others. They want to break the popular class into two classes. They want to destroy that and weaken the skills and competencies of part of the middle class. This is very important to keep in mind. And we need to reply to the AI promise with some kind of concerned bright-sidedness. So there would be like an epidemic among workers who would lose their morale, and people would actually give up. And you say, okay, at the beginning it's faster, better, but then few people are losing productivity because they don't feel good. And studies say that when we are using AI so much, it's hard to be motivated to look for more quality. So we become mediocre. When you use AI too much, you lose skills. And we see that in many sectors. Performance goes down. And from a cognitive viewpoint, we see that some neuronal networks disappear in our brains. Then the collective work is going down. When you use AI, you do produce something fast, average quality, and you give it to your colleague. The colleague receives it, it's mediocre. You either complain, but it's bad for the atmosphere at the workplace, or you just have to correct it. So people don't feel good at work anymore. Maybe if you give me 2 more minutes to draw a few conclusions. Yes? All right. I have 4 political conclusions. First, like I said, work is in danger, labor in danger. So first, we need to defend professions. We need to defend professionals and their skills. AI is working in automated fashion. It is not reliable. So we are not using our skills, and we just have people with new skills who are just monitoring AI. But how long shall we be able to monitor AI if we don't acquire the skills? So it is essential for work today and workers. So you need to know that the total automation prospects with universal income is something that is not working with capitalism. Capitalism means you need to work to make profit. So we need to demystify that. Second conclusion. Today, AI is a big waste, and it's not going to keep its promises. It's not the end per se. It's the way this technology is deployed with a lack of rationale. It's irrational. So some even say that in China, when we see how they're using it in a more localized way, not just generative AI, their usage is more useful for productiveness. So there's a gap in resources. There will be a financial crisis, and who's going to pay that? In the US, we know that AI is like a geopolitical priority. This is absolute priority. They're comparing AI to the atomic bomb, according to the U.S. administration. So the AI program is directly under the competence of the Energy Department. There is massive support, geopolitical support to that. A lot of pressure put by the U.S. on Europe to keep digitalizing Europe. Lastly, the left. What do we have to say? Progressive socialization regarding AI. So first, more regulation. Need to regulate AI. You first have to allow a product before selling it. It's not the case. These projects today are dangerous. There will be major industrial accidents because of AI. So we need to monitor that upstream. And then we need some type of watermarks, like something that enables us to trace back AI. Technically speaking, it does exist. It is there in China, not in Europe. Then you need to provide for a non-AI space. We need to deliberately define what's for AI, what should not be covered by AI. And finally, we need to use that tool to move towards new types of awareness of our collective life, like democratic planning. Of course, there are great possibilities there, great scenarios to improve industrial policies, to improve the coordination of our ways of life. And this is something which is environmental, democratic. This is what we need to imagine today together. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much. And before we go to the next session, there's a coffee break, so there's coffee outside, and we will return here for the second session on action and mobilization. And we have the two.
Okay. But before we go to coffee break, unfortunately, I am the bearer of bad news now, or maybe good news, because we have some amazing speakers to give some interventions on the topics we touched on in this session. And without further ado, please welcome Otto Brun to give his remarks.
Thank you so much. Thank you for the invitation. My name is Otto Brun, and I'm the co-chair of the Finnish Left Alliance since our party congress in November. And it's truly an honor to be here, and I want to thank you for the amazing speeches we started off with, and Isabella and Cedric for the fantastic interventions that brought the For the People initiative to a flying start. I want to bring enthusiastic greetings from Finland, where the Left Alliance has been able to increase its party membership by 50% during the last 4 years. A massive insurgence of young people wanting to make a difference through the leftist movements, and talking about this event brought an idea of internationalism and hope to struggles that they feel at a moment of fascist violence is needed. So I cannot stress enough that this event is extremely timely and important. And we have come to a moment where, from the liberal illusion of the end of history, we are facing class struggle from above. The Nordic experiences of the last few years of the radical and racist far right making an alliance with the conservative right has produced an unprecedented attack on low-income people's livelihoods, while producing massive tax cuts for the rich. This is a moment where we cannot talk about a social bargain anymore. It is a theft of our livelihoods and the essentials of daily life, supported by the radical far right for the extremely wealthy, in a moment of already rising inequality. And I think the presentation by Cedric brought out quite well how the attack from corporate AI is entering at a moment where safety nets are already being dismantled, and this attack enters at just such a moment. There's talk of a polycrisis with geopolitical tensions, climate breakdown, and other unprecedented inequality and other factors converging. But it is not enough to highlight that things are complex. Our analysis in the present moment must give us tools to reclaim power. We urgently need non-reformist reforms to struggle for that return to us and our peoples the sense of being able to build collective powers against initiatives such as corporate AI. I myself sit in the board of the Southwestern Finland Health and Social Services which provides social and health services for 500,000 people. And last year, we had an increase in our cost of Microsoft licenses of 10%. For next year, we have an increase of 13%. And they say these prices will be going up as we seemingly have no alternative. At the same time, these social and healthcare services are facing increasing budget cuts. This equation is untenable, and I think we immediately need initiatives that provide open source platforms for basic necessities and care, such as healthcare services, to build on European strengths of open source in an encompassing way. That is what is needed, and I think Isabella's analysis of anti-fascist economics is a promise of initiatives and ideas that we can build on at the present moment. This is great, and I look forward to building reading circles, a new innovation in our leftist movement around this book and organizing around this concept and its ideas. I was told when I was little that the EU develops through crisis, but in the present crisis I can only see paralysis. And I think this should be the moment for the left to stand up and for the internationalist left to stand up and demand the EU to take a direction where it supports the livelihoods of working peoples around Europe. Comrades, we have a future to win, and I'm very happy to join this initiative on behalf of the Left Alliance of Finland. Thanks a lot.
Thank you very much, and sorry for preluding to the coffee a little too early. We now have Katarina Martins, please, and the next speaker after will be Jean-Luc Mélenchon, please.
So, hi, my name is Katarina Martins. I'm co-chair of the European Left Alliance along with Malin Bjork. And first of all, I want to thank Clémence, I want to thank Lee, and I want to thank Marisa and everyone that made this moment possible. Less than 1 year ago, we had the first Congress of the European Left Alliance in Porto, in Portugal. And back then, we were discussing how to make the left stronger, how could this space be more than a party, how could we put together academic investigation movements to battle for a better future. And the idea of the foundation is this, and it's wonderful that in less than a year we are here and we have a foundation, and it seemed impossible, and I believe lots of people would like it to be impossible at the institutional level, but here we are. I'm glad to see you, and thank you so much. So I won't take too long. Isabella was just when she arrived, she was talking about the urgency of this moment. She is here between a baby and a book. She managed to have time here because we do know that the world is in an edge. And she talked about how this economics is building. We had this liberal approach of the economic that could only be for a few. And so the far right is this instrument to tell us who is going to be left behind so we can be saved. But then we are in a new stage where it's for no one. And the political of war is here to tell us that this is to nowhere, to no one. And that people must, live with a world with an equality, with a few, with a less than a handful of men that are as rich as anyone has ever been in the history of mankind, and the rest of us will be struggling with a cost of life that is not affordable to anyone. And that edge is an edge in climate, in war, and of course in economics, and Cedric just make this really, clear picture of what we are living in with AI. I will not talk about what they talked about so well, and I'm sure you all want to listen to Jean-Luc Mélenchon, but I just want to point out something that, the left has had good analysis to what was going on. We saw it coming, and we can say we saw it coming, but actually no one cares, and it's not enough. So this is not about that. This is not about we saw it coming. This is about what we can do now. What we can do now. And sometimes when everything seems impossible, you can create a new world, and you can be strong. I think what France Insoumise is doing in France is showing us that with all the attacks, with all that is going on, we just had local elections that bring hope. And we know that because of what we had done. I mean, in 2018 in Lisbon, me, Jean-Luc, and Pablo Iglesias, we signed a document that was called Now the People, because we were just saying we could be off of Troika, what we could do. And we learned a lot about what Troika and what we could do. But now everything is different. So this is not about that. Everything is different, not just because of the pandemic, not just because of war, but also because of a center that have collapsed. You look at European Parliament, and you see that the center believed that they could put the far right away from the decisions and from the institutions if they would negotiate with the right. In the end, the right left them alone and went to vote with the far right, the Return Directive, and all kinds of authoritarian paths that we are seeing in the European Parliament. So this is a change, a huge change, also on the political ground, and that is where we are working now, and that is what we need now. For the people is because we work for the people. And launching something new is because we know that what we have done in the past is not enough and will not change the future. But what we can do now, and what we can learn from each other, and what we can learn from looking at this new reality, that is something to be achieved, and we know that we can do it. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you so much for inviting me as well to be here.
Thank you, Katarina. And now we are moving to our final speaker of the first session. So please give it up for Jean-Luc Mélenchon.
Bonjour tout le monde.
Good afternoon, everyone. Here I have the feeling that I'm trying to take some air. I come from France, you know that. And you know that in my country, France, there is a super violent political battle going on at all levels, on all topics, with all the methods that have been imported from the United States of America that they used to use in the past. They used that in Latin America, but now they're applying their own methods in Europe. In other words, insulting, questioning justice, death threats, absolute racism, open racism, control of all communication means to hit on the head of those who would like to react. In spite of that, in spite of the violence of the current situation, it is obvious that our work cannot stop. We cannot limit ourselves to doing politics. And by politics, I mean action in institutions through elections. We need to propose intellectual activities, of course. We can do more than ever. We need to understand the formula of happiness to find happiness. We need to understand what's going on, what's happening around us, the history that we know. If something is happening, stories are being told. This is happening because other things are happening around us. We all agree to say that, and hopefully we agree that we are living in a production mode called capitalism. Capitalism is not a metaphysical entity. It is a historical entity linked to a time T, a place P, and social relations and social opposition. Capitalism is not a thing. It's not something. It's not a bag of gold. It's a social process of private ownership on human production. It means that all policies require understanding. We need to understand what's going on around us. After the Reconstruction era following World War II, we had a different time that was fully administered by the United States of America. It was their privilege to print currency without any counterpart. In 1971, the world was covered by this huge amount of dollars that were used to pay for raw materials, and that would give the United States the possibility to do what they wanted as they wished when they wished, and pay what they wished without having to render any account to anyone. This system has been interrupted. A new geopolitical order is being implemented and built. And of course, this is a new organization of the productive order and the new method of accumulation of capital. This is why we are now in a new era. The dying power of the United States is trying to struggle to keep up with the rhythm at any cost, through any means, and mostly through violence, because they have no other means to implement their new geopolitics. Their new geopolitics, according to our global master, i.e. the United States, is fully focused on confrontation with China. China is the current world #1 producer, and mechanically speaking, I insist, mechanically speaking, is the first place of exchange, of trade, and somehow they want to have the first currency worldwide. The intellectual, technical, and material power of China cannot be caught upon. So there are only two ways to go. You either destroy their domination or you sign a deal with them. It will be the deal of the new era, the new epoch, as we could say. The last time we needed World War to reach that, and the one before another World War. So our task here with our political generation is to avoid a new World War, to create a new geopolitical order. So this is where we need to focus on. First, we need to understand. It is clear that if capitalism has a story, it would be sad that progressive ideas have no story to tell. So we need to think about a new production mode. We should not just repeat formulas learned by the previous generation and just do the same repetitions and so on of things that are never being applied correctly. So we need to believe that our task is to rebuild everything and do it swiftly. Because in the past, we used to have time between elections, be with election calendars. We no longer have such time. We only have deadlines. If we cannot reverse the trend within a specific deadline, climate change will solve itself on its own, and it will deorganize human organizations and production modes for everyone and for the production itself to produce a universe that I don't know, because nobody has ever seen how universe happened. It will destroy a lot, and capitalism will rebuild itself in its own way. I don't know how, but on the stage of the reconstruction. So this is what we need to better define. Collectivism is the alternative to the capitalistic thought, but capital per se has produced its own thinking. What does it want to do? Where is it going? Now it's an ideal step for them now to sell anything. Anything could become merchandise and be sold. At the beginning of capitalism, part of the production would contribute to the movement of goods. And then there would be other modes of production like farmers, craftsmen, and so on and so on. Then capitalistic activities accumulate things and were used by everyone and covered all human activities. It means that today, and we mentioned it before, Nancy Fraser has determined and proved how feminism would understand that free work done by women under the dominating authority of patriarchs is one of the components of the circulation of capital. And this is where we stand today. Capitalism is controlling everything, can turn everything into merchandise. So they need to implement their ideology to provide legitimacy to the order of things, because no society can work if it is not seen as legitimate when it comes to its fundamentals to fulfill the task of social production needed on a daily basis. Now, if you say that, you will understand why they invented this, why fascism is not just only a bad moral idea. It's not just only something that is working against us. Fascism is about organizing an understanding of the world which is fully built on an idea that some people will dominate others. It's about supremacy. Racism is a type of supremacy. A color of skin is better than others. Islamophobia is one supremacism. One type of religion is to prevail over others. Sexism is a type of supremacy. The rejection of the understanding of the rights of nature and the rights of humans as animal species is a type of supremacy. Human beings are to dominate nature and not be in harmony with it. That is to be organized in cycles which are shared with a domination relationship.
I think that we need to take into consideration power relations and the ideological construction. It goes through a fight from an intellectual point of view and a struggle against supremacism. There is no possibility to compromise with supremacism because what is at stake at the end is our political extermination. So we need to bear in mind that they try to control the media, the textbooks, the content of our curriculum. And it also means that knowledge is becoming a commodity. We have this notion of biosphere. I think that it was a Nobel Prize in chemistry, and he decided to invent a new concept, the noosphere concept, because in the past, the human knowledge was something scattered around, but now everything is within the hand of the digital tool. So we have the possibility to have, for the very first time in the history of humanity, the fact that the whole knowledge is within the hands of a limited number of people, and if you want to have access to it, you need to buy it.
This is a theory of Cédric Durand that you heard before. He enables us to better understand a new way of organization of capitalism. What he says is it's not new or it's not more anti-capitalistic. It aims at describing an order of organization of the merchandisation of the world. Capitalism, which is not productive anymore. It's capitalism always needs to create new spaces to accumulate stuff. We have all the concerns of Rosa Luxemburg that she had there appearing again there. So this space, they're creating the new space with a debt, which is owning a future that does not exist, and then the transactions, which are on knowledge and the right of passage. To do anything, you need to pay a right to pass, a right to go, to enter into this movement of the merchandise. We have a global workshop. So to go from one room to another of the workshop, you need to be part of the globalization of the digital work and be part of the exchanges. The opponent has changed its face. It has changed its methods. It has changed its methodology. Suprematism is not the reproduction of a specific combination of fascism, the denial of the class struggles, Nazism. No, it's a combination of all that, which includes all the types of domination, not to slow them down or transform them into a compromise. No, to increase them, to allow them to go to the end purpose. So capitalism is not able to go on with the current rationale, including with AI. On the one hand, you would have technical progress with the accumulation of extraordinary capacity to produce, and at the same time reduce the level of consumption because wages will go down, because free work should be replacing all types of activities that will lead to the reproduction of the human existence. So it needs to defeat that obstacle. This is the purpose of that. So we needed this foundation here. We at Insoumis, we pay so much attention to the production of ideas and programmatic alternatives. For example, the planning, environmental planning. We believe that environmental planning was made based on the work which is provocative. It's planning. It's like a red figure put on our opponents, and they start shouting that we would like to recreate the Soviet Union. And we would not be in favor of that. No, what we would like is for them to revolt and shout at us. So we could have taken a more conventional vocabulary. We could have said, like the technocrats say, provisional management. No, we decided to call it planning. There's a plan and a trick in the trick, because they're using this word against something they call us Soviets, among other things, of course, to remain polite. But what they're missing in this idea is that planning includes economic and social content that's very dense. It's about nationalization of time. Capitalism is the realm of time for increased and speed up accumulation, money, merchandise, money. The cycle has to speed up all the time. It has to produce its own accumulation. So planning means to reduce that and restore the right to have a longer time. Long time means reproduction of species and life in harmony, not just for poets, but for a cyclical approach with what we would call nature. Hoping that nature and human being would be two different things. This is the situation today. Of course, this is the replacement of an order by another. I was an activist of a socialist party, as you know. So in the best case scenario, I was a radical reformist. Now, best case scenario. Now, if we have to repackage new reality with better words, okay, radical reformism, but I don't believe in that at all. I think that a new stakeholder is the people. The people is part of history. So this part of the population that needs to produce and reproduce its material existence needs to go through networks. They need to access services that can only be provided by network of power, electricity grid, energy, food, and others, gas, water, all these networks, all these basic services that contribute to the reproduction of material life. Collectivization of the networks is one of the first tasks of the collectivist and assumi governments, because this is the way to first restore the dictatorship of long time over short time. And secondly, we need to take into account a new mode of governance, which is about meeting the needs. The understanding of the needs requires democracy. It means a capacity for people to say what they need and to provide basic structures where they can say it. This is why democracy is not, as I heard when I was young, some kind of something you would give up for the bourgeoisie to make sure that we don't feel too bad with them. No, it's the implementation of collectivism. No democracy, no collectivism. Who are against democracy? Supremacists. They want to dominate and decide what's good and bad for us. So we need everyone to know what's good and what's not. Because in the current society, or the one we're going to create, it also requires a new understanding of the way we are meeting all our needs. Because for human beings, everything is artificial. We have needs as a species. We need to sleep, we need to reproduce, we need to feed. But the way we do it actually depends on ways of doing it, on our culture, on our cultural understanding. We are social and cultural beings. So if we want to change society, we will also have to change the consumption patterns. And it is not possible just because we impose it. We need the full consent of the entire society. So we need to understand that the society should become more aware of its situation. We should be more educated. And this cannot be part of the merchandise or mercantile because it would only be accessible to those who can afford it. So these are the huge tasks ahead of us. We need to rethink our era, rethink the ways, the reasons why the accumulation mode is leading to the more racism, Islamophobia, sexism. These are not unforeseen consequences, but this is a plan implemented with method to keep domination on us. Secondly, we need to be able to think about a different type of society where socialization of social and human life would be an object of production. It would be collective and democratic. It would enable us to think differently, a way to access reality differently. These are huge and ambitious tasks. I'm aware of that. Now, I do think that this is something that proves that we need collectivism. We are more likely to find a solution if we all work on it, and not if we just give up our governance to others. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much for the speakers, and thank you very much for all the speakers. And we will have a break for a little half hour with coffee outside, and then we will reconvene for the second session on actions and mobilizations. And I think that is now very much enlightened by great speakers. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Kogo tym razem musisz przedstawić?
Nie, patrzę na to, że Karlik kurwa ogłosił wszędzie neoradnych.
Tak?
Tą neoradną, tak.
No ale to jakbyś...
Everybody, please come back at your seats because the second session and the final session will start in a few moments. So please be quiet and seated. It would be perfect. Thank you very much.
Neoradnych sobie powołują. Będą neoradnych odwoływać.
Tak, mamy siadać. Ale nie, tu mamy już teraz siadać. Nie, czy później? Nie, ty jesteś ten, ty jesteś w ogóle...
Wywalona jestem. Wydawało się, że przez chwilę miał być... No to na pewno przypadku.
I'm looking for Todd Brogan and Dave Keating, please. Ah, thank you.
Hi.
You can just sit just here
Okay.
in the middle. So you have two choices: or you speak from your seat, or you do the pulpit, whatever you like. No problem. Okay, the same. Okay.
And
So I will do the same. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
and this one was.
Yeah, if you want to leave it there.
Hello and welcome to the second session of our launch event for the People Foundation. If you could please take your seats as soon as possible, that would be very, very nice. Thank you. All right, so we are moving onwards to session number 2, and it's a session on action and mobilization. And who is better to talk about mobilization than a person who is experienced in trade unions? And please give a very warm welcome to Todd Brogan.
Thank you very much. And bear with me, like Isabella. I have a 6-month-old child, so when I printed my speech today, I came all the way here and realized I only had half of it. So I'll be reading from my phone. My name is Todd Brogan. I'm the Director of Campaigns and Organizing for the International Trade Union Confederation, which through its 340 affiliates represents some 200 million workers in 169 countries. And as everyone has said today, we're meeting at a moment filled with peril for working people. War rages on 3 continents, including this one. The explosive growth of inequality has halted poverty reduction globally, and it's even begun to reverse it in Africa. The world is speed running through climate catastrophe benchmarks, and the expansion of democracy has not only been halted, but has been rolled back at least 50 years. VDEM, a democracy institution that reports on these things, found that 74% of the world's population now lives in autocracies. 74%. And they say that the world has never before seen as many countries autocratizing, moving in that direction at the same time. And as we heard earlier, AI has arrived to make all of this worse. According to the ITUC's own Global Rights Index, violations of workers' rights around the world are skyrocketing. In 2025, Europe received the lowest rating since the index began more than 12 years ago. Trade union leaders like CGT's Sophie Binet in France face legal action underwritten by billionaires for using words that they do not like. Unions in Sweden are refused their right to collective bargaining by companies like Elon Musk's Tesla. In 2024, workers in 32% of European countries faced restricted access to justice. In 2025, that number jumped to 52%. Likewise, the right to strike, which we hold dear, is violated in 73% of European countries last year. In Georgia, where trade unions have long received solidarity support from international unions, from organizations like the ITUC, a new foreign influence law requires them to register as organizations pursuing the interests of a foreign power, if even a minority of their income comes from abroad, from organizations like ours. In Italy, attempts to crack down on strikes and protests, the arrests of trade union leaders, the ransacking of union offices by fascists also resulted in that country being downgraded for the first time in our index's history. Here in Belgium, in Finland, in France, we see continued pressure from authorities on striking workers, while governments in Albania and Hungary, Moldova, Montenegro, and the United Kingdom tried to broaden the definition of essential services so that they could restrict the right to strike. In Armenia and in Netherlands, in North Macedonia, we even see the emergence of something from the old days that we call a yellow union, an employer-dominated union. This is the situation in the region considered the best in the world for workers. Now imagine, if you will, what it's like for a worker in Congo, in Panama, in Malaysia. So it's in this context that the ITUC has been running a campaign for democracy. And through it, we have tried to articulate why it is that unions see democracy as the only way for workers to shape their workplaces and their societies and their institutions. Because it's only in democracies where workers can freely organize, can bargain collectively, and strike. It's only in democracies where workers can exercise their fundamental freedoms of speech, of assembly, of religion, where they can access independent information, where they can assert their rightful place in self-governance. And increasingly, democracy as a form of government is losing the confidence of workers everywhere. In countries that claim to have it, like Dave and I both happen to be American, we're here from the American century of humiliation in exile. In countries that claim to have it, we see it compromised and failing to ensure the freedom required for workers to win the material progress they need for themselves. That's why we also focus in this campaign on what democracy must deliver. For the rich to be taxed their fair share, for green jobs to be good jobs with union rights and living wages, for universal social protections that ensure everyone has their basic needs met, for big tech, which we heard about earlier, to be regulated so that every platform and digital worker can enjoy the rights owed to them under international law, and for an end, of course, to the senseless wars that are killing our comrades, whether that's in Iran or Lebanon or Sudan or Ukraine, and destroying economies and making all of us less safe. We also spell out in this campaign who the real threats to democracy are, and importantly, I want to take a moment on this point, how they're financed. Because Financial questions, friends, are political questions. The ITUC makes the sometimes controversial claim that we represent the largest democratic social movement in the world. And that's because no other popular force can trace an enrolled membership from the platform riders of Manila to the migrant workers of the GCC or the gold miners of South Africa to a single institution that brings their collective power to bear at the ILO, at the UN, or here in Europe through our colleagues at the ETUC, the European Trade Union Confederation, to the European Parliament. Activists often like to say that they have the money, but we have the people. But the fact is that we need both to win the world that we want. And trade union membership is not merely an association of the like-minded. In fact, as many of you who are trade union members in the room will know, we are often not of like mind. We're socialists and social democrats and communists and liberals and yes, even conservatives in a lot of our unions. But we nonetheless see in each other something foundational, a common interest. And that's because unions carry a seed of working class unity that transcends industry and sector, ethnicity and race, gender and national origin. We may not have yet been able to forge a political consensus, a partisan political consensus globally, but we are building an independent working class politics that can effectively defeat fascism. And we've nurtured a seed of international working class solidarity that any left-wing project should strive to bring to harvest. We've done this in part because workers have a financial association to this endeavor. What we do as unions is largely financed by the dues they pay to their local, their sectoral, or their national unions. And with our comrades on the left, many of you, we often talk about shared analysis and shared vision, and we debate strategies to win, but seldom do we actually address the financial and organizational requirements of doing what must be done to win the world that we want. We often duplicate each other's efforts. We dispute turf, we divide ourselves over hypotheticals, we scramble for external funds, or we build organizations that disappear after one election cycle or if one donor's change of heart. This is less often the case for our adversaries. The far right is directly financed, platformed, networked, and operating in service to corporate underminers of democracy, to factions of capital whose CEOs and large investors are leading what we at the ITUC call a billionaire coup against democracy. They can be heterodox in their tendencies, and they are willing to commit resources over a long term to experiment and see what sticks. As workers, when we win higher wages or improve working conditions through social dialogue or collective bargaining or in the streets, we often, at the end, settle a contract. And too many unions and too many workers go back to their jobs and their lives and their families. But our employers do not. They take the unearned gains that they've kept, that we haven't been able to get from them at the table, and they invest them in political projects. These political projects weaken our collective bargaining power or eliminate, in their view, in their hope, the need to recognize it altogether, as we've seen with Tesla. And we see this vicious cycle perpetuated by companies the ITUC has named before: Amazon, Meta, Tesla, SpaceX, Blackstone, Palantir, Glencore, Vanguard, and the list goes on. And executives from these companies, they use the wealth that they have to buy up media properties. We're seeing this in France right now. They use it to monopolize and exploit our data, and they capture states and even international institutions. This merger of the far right with finance, tech, armament, and extraction capital is fueled by billions of dollars moving through direct political contributions, think tank networks, public contracts, and even corporate transactions. And this money, of course, rightfully belongs to us. It belongs to workers. It's produced by the sacrifice of body and mind and time, and it's money that workers could use to build their own lives or build their collective power. And the conflict that arises from this unequal exchange of labor for compensation is what motivates most workers to join a union in the first place. And it's in this conflict where democratic theory that we hear and talk about so much as left-wingers meets realities of working class democratic practice. So when the ITUC talks about a fight for democracy, we're not talking about democracy as defined by one geopolitical bloc or another. We're talking about how workers use it and how workers experience it. For workers, democracy is not a form of governance whose credibility, or is a form of governance whose credibility lies in its daily practice. We use it to organize ourselves first to get what we need to survive. and then to change and intervene in the circumstances around us. And we've created unions as our forges for democracy. Millions of workers speak their minds for the first time in their unions. They learn to protect another person, to protect each other for the first time in their unions. They experience the brilliance of collective deliberation and the power of collective action. And for many of them around the world, it's the first time they experience democracy in any form. And that's why I think today's discussion is so critical, because the far right is not only contesting for seats in parliament, but for power on all fronts. It's organized its money, and it's using it to undermine any counterforce, especially unions, from better organizing its own. And we, as the left and as unions, are talking about such similar things. Our adversaries are the same. It's the far right, it's corporate monopoly, it's autocracy in all of its forms, including in the workplace. When you say democracy cannot survive without a material foundation of dignity, we see our fight for democracy that delivers the material gains workers demand. When you say transnational solidarity and autonomy, we see our own fight for solidarity among nations, within them, and within our own unions. We see your concern for platform workers reflected in our own campaign to win an ILO convention on platform work, one that would create a floor from which workers can organize and bargain, and from which parliaments around the world can legislate without fear of capital flight or coercion. We see your call to tax the rich in our own call for a UN convention on tax, and the dozens of progressive tax campaigns led by unions in countries around the world. So we share a vision for a just transition, for living wages, for investment in public services, for feminism at the front, for peace through common security. And this organic alignment isn't only in Brussels. We see it emerging wherever workers are fighting for democracy. In Spain, where unions back the regularization of millions of migrant workers, rejecting right-wing nationalism and weakening the employer's attempts to undercut wages for everyone. In Korea, where unions played a key role in beating back an attempted presidential coup and have since won major changes to labor law after 30 years of fighting for it. In Myanmar, where unions in exile still operate inside and outside of the country in collaboration with opposition forces trying to win the war and restore democracy. In Indonesia, where unions are organizing nickel smelters and advancing a just transition agenda at this critical choke point in Pacific trade and industry. In Senegal, where unions took to the streets to beat back attempts to delay elections and in the process preserve the democratic order. Even in Nigeria, where the NLC and its affiliates forced the hand of Africa's richest man into a settlement after a ruthless campaign of union busting and attempts to monopolize entire industries. Even in my country, in the US, where trade union members are illegally prosecuted for protesting for peace in Palestine or for defending their neighbors against unlawful deportation and detention. So our common adversaries are not using their money to unite workers as a political unit, but to strip them of that identity altogether, to redefine their associations along lines of race or gender expression or national origin. So a relevant question we hope FTP will take up is, how can the left better coordinate its resources to build other working class institutions internationally, including, as Isabella Weber said earlier, building our unions? What we need is a politics that does not speak to workers, but is of workers speaking for themselves. We need a politics that recognizes the urgency of the moment and embraces and builds on the solutions unions have offered, so that we can feed and shelter and clothe and care for and educate working people today, not in a distant utopian future. We need a politics that equips workers to build counterpower for themselves, both at work and in their societies, and that supports the financing of trade union organizing programs abroad. One that eliminates barriers here in Europe for migrant workers, green economy workers, farm workers, platform workers, domestic workers to organize. That eliminates restrictions on the right to strike. That provide, of course, good jobs in general, but especially for young workers who are being sacrificed at the altar of austerity and precarity and automation. I'll be closing here in 1 second, so thank you for your patience. But more than a century ago, these aspirations were captured. These aspirations for a new social contract were captured in this idea of social justice when it was first defined. It was seen then as a prerequisite to a lasting peace. If that's the politics you have in mind, you are going to find allies in the global trade union movement. I want to thank and congratulate the European Left Alliance for launching For the People today. I hope we'll work together to equip the workers of Europe, but also the world, with the tools and resources they need to win a new social contract and to win the fight for democracy. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, and I think we certainly will take you up on that invitation. And then I will pass the word to someone who is author and a journalist and is coming from Breaking from America. Please.
Thank you very much. It's an honor to be with you all today for today's launch. I think it's a really, really important development, and I'm happy to be a part of it. Today I'm going to be speaking about the current state of Europe. I'm going to give an unvarnished take. I want to talk about the problems, but also the potential solutions in the context of my new book, which is called The Owned Continent: How to Liberate Europe from American Military, Economic, and Cultural Dependence. Now, the book posits that America's domination over Europe is just as dangerous as the Russian threat, but for different reasons. America has power over Europe that Russia could only dream of. Europe is dominated by the United States economically, militarily, and culturally, and that last aspect is a unique argument that I'm bringing to the table in the book, because I believe that the dominance of US music, television, movies, news, internet, and social media has fostered a servile attitude toward the United States. Now, a little bit about me. Todd mentioned that I am also American, so you may be wondering, why the hell should I listen to yet another American parachuting into Europe and telling Europeans what to do? And it's a valid question. So I have spent half my life in the United States and half my life in Europe. I left the United States in 2006. My last job in the US was working as a reporter, a TV reporter in Washington, covering the US Congress, and I was disgusted by what I saw. And I also lost hope for the future of American governance. I saw an archaic governing system built for the 18th century that could not meet the challenges of the day. But most importantly, I was disgusted with the Iraq War. That war, in which I lost a family member, made me look elsewhere, outside of the United States, for hope. I've lived here for 20 years. I'm now 2 times an EU citizen. I have 2 EU passports, 1 American passport, so I'm 2/3 European on paper. I am now the Brussels correspondent for France 24, which is the French international news network of France. I cover EU developments, and I also have my Substack, Gulfstream Blues. By the way, the French version of the book is coming out next month. It's called Le Continent Captif. So I don't consider the book to be coming from the perspective of an outsider. I consider myself European now. I will live here the rest of my life. I have no intention of going back to the United States. Even if the United States wasn't in the precarious situation it's in right now, life in Europe is better. Europe is a better place than the United States, and I would, of course, rather be here. Now, I moved to Europe in 2006 having read some books about the European Union. As I mentioned, I was disillusioned with the United States, and I read a book by Jeremy Rifkin called The European Dream. I read a book by T.R. Reid, former Washington Post correspondent here in Brussels, called The United States of Europe, which spoke of a new emerging superpower, that the European Union was emerging into a power that could take on the United States, or at least counterbalance it. And looking ahead to a century that would be dominated by the US and China, I thought, I like the sound of that third way, the third alternative. I also thought the European project would be something incredibly interesting to cover, so I quit my job and I moved to Europe. Now, when I came to Europe, I came with a lot of hopes based on what those books told me. Those books told me that young Europeans no longer identify with their member states. They feel European first. That Europeans are finally realizing that they can't just be dominated by the United States, that they need to come together to be sovereign. My first port of call was London. So you can imagine I was disabused of these notions pretty fast. I left hoping to find a superpower that could take on or counterbalance the United States, and what I found instead was a collection of vassal states under continued American military occupation. And I know that may sound harsh, but the events of the last year have proven it. How else can you explain why European citizens have accepted their leaders' repeated surrender to Donald Trump over the past year? We know that such groveling to a Russian or a Chinese leader would never be accepted by European citizens. So why does it somehow seem normal in the American context? Why have our European media not questioned why our leaders have to continually go to the White House in supplicant posture and surrender on behalf of all of us? I believe that there's a connection to the overconsumption of American culture. Now, from the time that they're born, Europeans are inundated with American culture. If you turn on the radio, you will find an American song. If you turn on the TV, you will most likely find an American TV program. It's been like this for decades, and there's no way that that hasn't had a psychological impact on Europeans. I believe it has made a vast swathe of the European public subconsciously think that they are in America, or at least on the outer edges of an American empire. And that has made it psychologically difficult to accept that the US could now be an adversary or even an enemy that means Europe harm. This didn't happen overnight. Like frogs in boiling water, Western Europeans accepted more and more American domination over their daily lives in the 80 years from 1945 until today. In 1989, Eastern Europeans accepted it all at once. As part of the euphoria from being freed from Russian domination, they accepted a new, less brutal form of occupation from America. In the book, I trace the development of American domination, starting with the rush of Hollywood into European movie theaters following the destruction of World War I. Then moving on to the advent of the Marshall Plan and NATO following World War II, which involved an implicit acceptance of American control over Europe's economic and military affairs. And I trace it all the way to the 2000s, when American tech giants started controlling our daily lives. But it's not all doom and gloom. In the final section of the book, I lay out 6 essential steps to liberate Europe from the United States and achieve European sovereignty. And that's really what I want to talk about today. How we can liberate Europe. How we can get Europe to a point where it doesn't have to give in to Donald Trump's extortion. And how we can expel American troops from this continent, because I think it's essential. First off, we have to take the problem of American cultural domination seriously. This is very difficult. We can't force Europeans to watch European content. But we have to find a way to get Europeans interested in the culture and news from their neighboring countries, rather than having American culture and news be the only culture they know other than their own. The EU founders dreamed of a common European culture, but they didn't know where to start. They were, after all, politicians. It wasn't an area that they knew. But the irony is, we now do have a common European culture. It's American culture. An Italian and a German don't know anything about each other's pop stars or TV shows or news or politics. But when they come together, they can talk about American culture. They talk about Superman, Beyonce, Stranger Things, and they talk about Donald Trump. Almost all Europeans know more about American politics than they do about their neighboring countries' politics, and certainly more than they know about EU politics. Many younger Europeans who get their news from American social media even know more about US politics than their own country's politics these days. That is a problem, because it means Europeans are focusing on American preoccupations rather than their own European priorities. They're focusing on American culture wars, American politics. Even whether you like America or you hate it, one thing that Europeans have in common on both sides is that they're obsessed. And this is a real problem. Now that brings me to the next essential step. We have to fix Europe's broken education systems. The reason that Europeans don't know about EU politics is because their education systems never taught them even the basics of EU civics. How the EU actually works. The EU is taught as a historical development, maybe as a crisis management in modules about current events. But the basics of what the EU is and how it works, nobody's taught it. It's taught a bit in the Eastern EU member states because they developed these curricula from the period 2000 to 2004, right before recession, but in Western Europe it's not taught at all. And that's been shocking to me as an American, because it's something I think that the US actually does quite well. We do it from a young age. At the age of 13, we have a course called Social Studies, which Todd probably knows, which teaches you how a bill becomes a law. It teaches you what your town does, what your state does, and what your federal level of government does. It tells you how these three levels of governance interact with one another and who does what. And Europeans are not taught about this at all. It would be like if you grew up in Texas and your school system only taught you what's happening in the Texas State House, but ignored Washington as if it didn't exist. Now, the EU is a confederation. It makes laws. I know it's often referred to as a bloc in media, which drives me crazy, but it is already a confederation. And so to ignore the federal level of government in Europe is to deprive citizens of essential information about something that is making 60% of the laws that impact them on a day-to-day life. Now, this also continues to lifelong learning, what Europeans get from their news media. And that's the next recommendation I make in the book. European news media does a horrible job covering the European Union because journalists and their editors are victims of the same education systems. They also don't know what the EU is or how it works. And EU countries allow coverage of the EU to be dominated by Anglo-American news outlets. They set the narrative, which is then repeated by national editors in continental Europe. We saw this play out during the COVID pandemic, where we saw American and British news media referring to a vaccine disaster in Europe. We saw American and British news media say that the EU had a vaccine export ban. The EU never had any such ban. America had that ban. And the reason why the EU's rollout of vaccinations was slightly slower is because the facilities in Europe had to supply the rest of the world because the facilities in America were legally prohibited from sending vaccines out of the country. That narrative was not in European media because it wasn't in the interest of American media or British media to spread that narrative, particularly in that very delicate period after Brexit, where British news media were desperate for a good news story about the process of Brexit. Now, I made the analogy of Texas and the US federal government. That often makes people wince. They say, but the US is a country. The EU isn't a country. How can you make that comparison? But any social scientist will tell you that the EU is already a confederation. It's not a bloc. It has a legislature that makes laws. It has a high court. It has all the hallmarks of a federation like the US, Canada, Switzerland, Australia, or Germany, with the notable exception of not having a single foreign and defense policy and having no federal taxation. I believe that it should. I have always identified as a federalist, something I had to keep quiet about back when I worked for The Economist, but now I'm a little less free to use the F word. But a lot of people, even in this town, are afraid to use the F word. It's not such a popular thing. But whenever I say, I firmly believe that European sovereignty is only possible in the context of European federation. And when people disagree with me on this, I say, do you want an independent and sovereign Europe? They say yes. And I say, explain to me how you're going to achieve that without European federation. I have never been given a convincing answer. Usually people don't even try. The idea that we could be sovereign and independent as 27 separate countries is nonsense. We know that innately, but there's a resistance to pooling sovereignty and to pooling efforts. Now, in the book, there's also a chapter on flexing Europe's economic muscle. Europe has all the tools that it would need to be able to say no to Donald Trump's extortion, but it chooses not to use them. Why haven't governments and banks signed up to the European Payments Initiative that's been around for 10 years that would prevent Donald Trump from turning off Europeans' ability to pay each other with Visa, MasterCard overnight? All of our credit cards here in Europe are American. And if Donald Trump wanted to put all European countries on the Magnitsky sanctions list, it means we can all not use our credit cards tomorrow. Why has this been blocked? Why is Germany blocking the use of the anti-coercion instrument against the United States in response to Donald Trump's tariff threats? Why is France blocking the diversification of the EU's trade partners? Why is Italy blocking discussions on using the EU's tariff bazooka against US services imports? It's because Europeans haven't had the courage and confidence to use the strengths that they possess. I also in the book call for an EU army, and how the failure to create it is another example of Europe failing to use the strengths that it has. Now, the concept of an EU army has been an easy boogeyman for people to paint a caricature of, but we're not talking about one single military. We're talking about something like the National Guard in the US. I think most Europeans are not aware that each US state has its own military that is accountable to the governor. It's the confusingly named National Guard. There's nothing national about it, but those National Guards fight in foreign wars. They go to Afghanistan, they go to Iraq, because the president can command those individual US states, but constitutionally they are under the final command of the governor. So in the end, they are still state militaries. I think that's probably realistically the furthest we can get. But this discussion is never had in European media. An EU army is just presented as some kind of ethereal concept that people then assume means one unified European army, which scares people. And maybe it should. It sounds aggressive in a way. So there isn't a realistic and a honest conversation happening about that. And we know also that efforts to create independent European command and control have been blocked by the Atlanticist leadership of this continent for fear of undermining NATO. Now, NATO at this point is a paper tiger. There's one man who decides whether NATO is a paper tiger, and that's Donald Trump, and he has declared it so. If Donald Trump says NATO is a paper tiger, it means it exists only on paper. Article 5 protection is no longer there. And the more that we delude ourselves into thinking that the United States will defend this continent, the more we delay action to actually create independent European command and control that can resist a Russian invasion. I write in the book that Europe clinging to the NATO fantasy, which is a delusion exemplified by Mark Rutte and his hard-to-watch displays again this week in Washington, is preventing development of real solutions to give Europe military sovereignty. The obsession with increasing military spending is a complete red herring. It will not deliver European sovereignty, and the 5% target is nonsense. The only leader that had the courage to point that out was Pedro Sanchez. Even the US doesn't spend 5%, they spend 3.7% of their GDP on their military. And all that agreement does is commit European countries to buying more weapons from the American military-industrial complex. No mystery why the United States is pressuring the European countries to do that. Finally, the last step I outline is that Europeans must believe in themselves. I tell the story about visiting my relatives in Italy. It's one of my passports is Italian, which I got through ancestry citizenship, which Italy just ended last year, actually. But I went to visit my distant relatives there, and I heard them curse the fact that their great-grandmother had stayed in Italy, while my great-grandfather had gone to America. They wished that they had been born in America. They thought life was so much better there because they had this Hollywood conception of America. I disabused them of that notion. I asked them, how much holiday do you take per year? Do you ever worry about going bankrupt from healthcare? And then I told the stories about what my brothers' lives are like in the United States with their families. How my sister-in-law got 2 weeks maternity leave after giving birth to twins. And it disabused them of that. And yet still, they still weren't very enthusiastic about Europe. And actually, one of them said to me, Americans today are the descendants of people who had the courage and ambition to leave. We're the descendants of people who were too scared and lazy to leave. I do not believe that's true, but I believe that too many people here think it. I think a reason for Europe's passivity that we've seen certainly over the past year, have more to do with the scarring experience of World War II, which came well after the period of migration, and certainly well after my great-grandfather came to the United States. Europeans hear one message their whole lives. America is big, bold, and beautiful. And even if younger people are now getting a less sanitized image of America through social media, they're still unfortunately obsessed. We're still hearing this idea that while America is cool, Europe is old, tired, and lame. I hear it all the time when I'm outside of the Brussels bubble. People have cultural cringe about European pop music, about Eurovision, which, by the way, is the only successful cultural export that Europe produces at scale. Every year it has more viewers than the Super Bowl, the Oscars, and the Grammys combined. But Europeans are never told this, they're taught to be ashamed of it. We can't keep ceding the emotion of pride to the far right. We need to develop a European patriotism. We need to embrace a European pride, mindful of the horrific mistakes of the past, but moving on, learning from that, and creating a European civic nationalism. We can't keep ceding the emotion of pride and patriotism to the far right, and we can't keep letting the far right be the only ones speaking out against America right now. We need to offer Europeans a continental patriotism, and we need to define what being European is, in contrast to Europe's enemies. We need to explain why Europe is not America, and why that is a good thing that Europeans should be proud of. That we should be proud of what we've built in Europe, the rights that we have, especially the social rights, as Todd was talking about, and we need to be able to define what is attractive about this continent and why Europeans should not want to live in America, should not want to be watching America, be following American news, why they should pay attention to European politics, why they should believe in this continent, and why they should build this continent into a sovereign, independent power that can say no to Donald Trump and the United States. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I think that concludes our American block for now. And let's move to the European Federation of several comments. The first of all comes from Zofia Malisz from European Left Alliance and my home party, Razem from Poland. Please, the floor is yours.
Right. My American laptop. But I'm glad to follow up as also a member of a party that is a member of the European Left Alliance that is, known to be most transatlantically oriented. Glad you are here with your empathic words about workers and trade unions and this kind of very down-to-earth American-style view from the inside outside about our relationship. And before I go into my comments that will go through the topics, this is the privilege of someone who is coming almost at the end. You will recognize certain thoughts from Jean-Luc Mélenchon and the others in what I will be talking about. I wanted to first really tell you this is not even 2 years that we have started and sat down to build the European Left Alliance, the European party that is associated with this foundation. 2 years will be, I guess, somewhere around June this year, and we already have a European Left Alliance. We have the Foundation for the People, and we also have, let's not forget, our youth organization with its own statutes and independence. This is amazing, and as also on behalf of me, Filip, and the sizable delegation from Poland, I would like to thank you all, partners, Lee and Clemence, Malin and Katarina. This has been, we have learned from each other. I learned a lot from you. This is an incredible achievement, and we as a party, as a left party, the left wall in the Polish parliament, and one of these rare birds in Central Eastern European political scene that are really kind of solidly left. Thank you so much for this cooperation, and we really, really hope for more. Okay, so I wanted to come back a little bit to combine the discussion and maybe give a little bit of pointers for mobilization for our two organizations, the party and the foundation, regarding work and AI mainly. So for decades, the economy was built on production. It still is. So you made something, you sold it, and you made profit. And this is the foundation of most of our political left tools. What we are seeing now, and the change that we are observing now, the revolution actually, is different. A small number of large technology companies control the infrastructures through which others work, trade, and communicate, and they charge for access. This is what Jean-Luc was talking about. Profit comes from production, rent comes from control. These are these two things that we are dealing with now. More and more of the economy is moving in the direction of rent. This is what people describe as tech feudalism, not as a slogan, but as a structure of dependence. You do not just work for a firm when you are an employee, you operate inside digital environments you do not control, under rules you did not set and cannot easily leave. I mean, for example, the software that you use and the software that actually manages your work. This is visible in everyday work. Tasks are assigned by systems, performance is tracked continuously, decisions are shaped before a human manager even appears. The labor process is reorganized through code. And this concerns actually both the blue-collar workers, so-called blue-collar workers, and the white-collar workers. So let's say in an Amazon warehouse, but also in an office, science policy office here next door. There is now strong research that describes this shift. Cecilia Ricap shows how large tech companies concentrate knowledge in her book. Nick Srnicek describes platforms as infrastructure systems like Uber, Amazon, or Microsoft Azure that entire sectors depend on to function. These are not just companies, they are the terrain on which economic activity takes place and our work takes place on. And that terrain is material. Luckily to us leftists, familiar with material analysis, it runs on electricity, on data, on physical infrastructure. This connects digital power directly to energy resources and industrial capacity. You can see the consequences directly. In warehouses, the pace of work is set by software. In offices, decisions are increasingly guided by tools that structure options in advance and bias us. The form differs, the direction does not. Control is being relocated. For the left, this matters because work has always been about power. Who decides and under what conditions, and what is the relationship of power between the employee and the boss? Now, part of that power is embedded in technical systems. This is, for example, what Razem, but also the Spanish government and the UK governments attempted at least to address in their work on algorithmic management of work. That is, algorithms, computers, objective, apparently, that decide whether you're hired, fired, and how your work is evaluated. So the question is no longer only who employs you, but what system organizes your work. Once you see that, another fact becomes clear. These infrastructures are highly concentrated. Google, Microsoft, OpenAI, what we heard in the first section, set the conditions under which others operate, and they are expanding into new areas. Companies like Palantir Technologies are moving directly, not only into security, which is dangerous enough, but also into public administration and health systems. You can leave the United States, Dave and Todd, but you cannot leave the US-controlled platforms like Palantir, who is kind of, spreading its wings here. This dependence travels with you, and that has political consequences. So, for the thoughts for our work, the left has built its strength downstream, where problems are visible: wages, housing, welfare. That work remains essential. But the center of gravity is shifting. The rules are increasingly set upstream in the design of infrastructures themselves. If those rules are set elsewhere, politics becomes reactive. It distributes, compensates, corrects, but within constraints, it does not control. So this question and the things that we should analyze and mobilize on moves not away from distribution, which is very important anyways today, but deeper into the foundations of that control. So from this, our priorities follow. Energy, data, infrastructure. That is where leverage sits. And that is where regulation matters, because this is one area where Europe already has real influence. The so-called Brussels effect shows that rules set here can shape global markets. That is something to build on, not to step back from. Working at this level also changes how the left has to organize itself. Acting upstream requires time and foresight. This is where a foundation, like Foundation for the People, matters. Building knowledge, developing program, anticipating where these systems are going. And the party, like European Left Alliance and its members, turn that into political force and mobilization. It requires confidence. These systems are built, but they can also be built differently. There are concrete entry points. Universities can retain expertise instead of exporting it. Workers can gain a say over the systems that structure their work, like reports from ETUC and international have also shown. Data, especially in health and public services, can be treated as a shared resource, not something extracted elsewhere. Even technologically, there is no single path. The dominant model in the US is resource intensive, that is data intensive, because that is what current markets reward there. Other approaches exist. For example, the Chinese are very, very intensively working on AI systems that are not as data greedy and not as energy greedy. In the short term, the direction is clear: regulate, tax, break concentrations of power, secure control over critical data. In the longer term, the question goes further and concerns who owns and governs the infrastructures themselves, so seizing the means of production. Building European capacity in this area is part of what digital sovereignty should mean in practice. So I plead for focusing a little bit more in our work on this upstream control of infrastructures, because this is where the limits of politics are increasingly set. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much for linking all the previous presentations together. We will now have José Manuel Puesa, please.
Yeah, thank you. Hi, my name is José Manuel Puesa. I come from Portugal, where I have the responsibility of coordinating Bloco de Esquerda. And I am very honored to participate in this meeting. Thank you very much for the invitation. I do believe that for the people is a decisive actor for the struggle, the counter-hegemonic struggle against the naturalization of neoliberalism and of the authoritarian answers to the crisis of neoliberalism. In this session about action and mobilization, I believe that we should include at the heart of our reasoning, of our thinking, the contradiction which we are living. Because on the one side, we have a solid awareness of the major contradictions of the current phase of capitalism, but on the other side, we lack the abilities to translate these awarenesses or this awareness into a broad political mobilization. So this is where we are right now, I do believe. In fact, I would suggest that at this current moment, the struggle against war and the struggle for a positive peace should be the focus of a strategy of mobilization at the European level. I want to bring back Jean-Luc Mélenchon's statement that the historical mission of the left at this moment should be to prevent a world war as the price to be paid by a change in the geopolitical landscape. So this, at least from my perspective, this should be, if we have to choose a focus, this should be the focus of our mobilization. Because on the one side, yeah, we have war, an understanding of war coming from the left, an understanding of war as the epitome of imperialism and of as the way that the dominant classes organize themselves to defend capitalism, patriarchy, a predatory strategy towards fossil fuel, etc. But on the other side, also coming from the left, we have this, let's say, notion of positive peace, which it's not only the absence of war, it's the demand of radical transformations at the social, economic, political, cultural levels that establish justice, autonomy, self-determination, emancipation as the pillars for a lasting peace. So the question is this possible? Is this possible in the current context of such a negative correlation of forces? And my answer is, it has been possible in the recent past, despite the fact that the contexts lived then were also extremely complex and extremely negative. Let me give you two examples. The first was the end of the 70s and the 80s in Europe during the so-called Euro missile crisis, which was triggered, as we all know, by the 1979 decision of NATO to deploy cruise missiles and Pershing II missiles in Western Europe. We were at perhaps the most serious peak in the Cold War by that time. Still, there was a huge mobilization during that period in several European countries, whose core element was a strong counter-hegemonic narrative which opposed arms reduction, democratic control, sovereignty to arms race, war spiral, and imperialism. This enabled the organization of massive protests, so a huge mobilization, in fact, all over Europe. All the main cities of Europe. And it has also allowed intersectionality to become a practice before it has become a well-known concept that we all share by these days. In fact, the contribution of the feminist movement to the mobilization against war, or the mobilization against the armament, etc., was extremely important. Let's take in mind, for example, the experiences like the Greenham Common Women's Peace Camp, with the investment on everyday peace, on the ethics of care, or the involvement of the environmentalist movement in this global struggle, denouncing the irreversible tragedy caused by nuclear weapons, and the connection between nuclear energy and a possible weaponization of this energy. So therefore, contesting all the economic system and the industrial system that gave place to that. Second example, the massive movement in 2003 against the war against Iraq. So we all know that a pan-European identity of a huge social movement that took place by that time, with a transnational organization, which gave place to broad and diverse coalitions, including the pacifist movement, trade unions, churches, intellectuals, artists, youth, and so on and so forth. The huge protests in 15 February 2003 were mobilized, once again, action and mobilization. They were mobilized by something that we should take into due account. They were mobilized by morally and politically easily understandable messages, linking that specific aggression against Iraq to a whole system of power. So definitely, I believe that anti-militarism is at the heart of the legacies where we come from. And that should be at the heart of the culture and of the political program that should be enhanced for the people. Now, what do we have right now? I will not be unrealistic But I would say that definitely we are not starting from the zero. We have a young generation which is very much mobilized for the struggle of Palestine. Therefore, materializing an understanding of peace based on rights, based on justice, based on self-determination. Today, we have known that the European Citizen Initiative that Ella has somehow launched on Palestine has reached almost 1 million, so we are close to 1 million, and this is a very good, so definitely we are not starting from the zero, okay? Second, we have a growing awareness. I come from Portugal, where this is at the heart of our political intervention right now. A growing awareness of the intimate linkage between war and the cost of living suffered by the great majority of the people, those that live from their wages. Finally, last but, well, not really the last one, but at least a last one, and a last element is the expression of political courage, which has been shown in different occasions, and I would like to emphasize the huge demonstration in Budapest for LGBT rights. So definitely, we are not starting from the zero. But we have huge challenges ahead of us. Namely, something so simple, I'm being ironic of course, which is to build a political subject for that struggle. Let me just say, to finalize, that Ella is, in my mind, in the view of Bloco de Esquerda, is a crucial contribution for this, for the building of this political subject at the European scale, and for the people is a crucial instrument to give a way of thinking and a way of acting to that political subject. Thank you.
Thank you for your intervention. And now we are moving to the last speaker of this session. And the speaker will be the co-chair of the European Left Alliance, Malin Björk.
Thank you very much, and thank you to all the speakers. As Philippe said, I'm one of the co-chairs. You saw my partner in crime, I was going to say, Katarina Martins, before. I am from the Swedish Left Party, so we have, the South and the North covered, but we also have now 11 parties in the European Left Alliance for the People and the Planet. And we are so happy to be part and welcome here just as visitors, as commentators for this important launch of the For the People Foundation, the think tank that is there to inspire and to make us think when we go and take action, to make us learn from each other, go and have visions, be nourished, so that we can have the strength and the ideas and the even concrete material to take action. I think we've felt some of it today in the different speakers, and I think about Isabelle and Cédric, this earlier panel, but also Todd and Dave, of course. And for me, it's very clear that a think tank is also a place where we don't agree on everything. And I will be frank that maybe, Dave, you do not have totally support here, whether it's about around, I was going to say American army, but you're here. A European army, or how we see sovereignty and how we build it. But
think tanks are places where we can meet ideas and we can discuss, and we can even be hard and criticize and harsh towards each other. And I think we look forward also within ELA, just as we will meet our counterparts, the European political parties' counterparts, and have discussions and difficult discussions for the People Foundation to also meet other foundations and thinkers to develop thoughts and also see where we strongly disagree and agree. So indeed, the patriotism that you outlined, I don't know, it will probably have discussions going high here during the drinks afterwards. That's all interesting. I think that ELA was created, as Sofia from Razem here mentioned, in 2024, and we're already here with more parties. We're launching this think tank with this endeavor, which will be part of the journey ahead. The youth wings are there. It shows that there is a lot of energy, a lot of political energy to go out there and discuss, to win hearts and minds, and maybe this is where ELA comes into the picture. What is our role? We are, of course, here today, and we discuss big ideas. We discuss, outline the global challenges, and then, as my colleague Otto from Finland did, in the end, you sit there and try to organize the healthcare sector in southwest of Finland, I think it was, and that's where we have to be relevant. So thank you for making that connection, because I think all these big and important visions and ideas, also when we go out there as political parties to win hearts and minds and win elections, we are here to win elections as political parties at least, then we need those concrete ideas and we need to translate. So that is our job here now, ELA part of the equation, to translate what we have learned, what we have heard, and to continue to discuss with you, to continue to feed ourselves. But in the end, we will have to go out there. And when you sit in your healthcare board, to have an idea how to make sure that you don't pay up those 13 or 30% to pay for patents for the logiciel. Now I'm mixing French also. So I think this is what we also vouch to do in ELA, in the European Left Alliance. We will work with our member parties to try to take the most of what you have mentioned here and what you will be doing here in the future, to take that to our members, to make sure that be they elected and be party leaders, like José Manuel here, or being a locally elected person sitting in Coimbra, or somewhere, Portugal, or Gdansk, or somewhere, that they should have ideas and actions that could carry in and change lives in their communities. So I just want to say a few words on the topics that you have addressed today. And also, ELA didn't start from nowhere. Many of our parties were collaborating, but we managed and we said that we want to create this platform so we can deepen our collaboration. And that's like Sofia said, we have really done that already, and we look forward to do that ahead. And one of the things, we have a political platform, but I was just going to raise some things that resonate with what have been said today, and it's about defending democracy. And I must thank Isabella, that probably left to finish her book and take care of her baby, we see very well what is happening. The establishment at the European level in many of our countries where the right wing and the extreme right wing are governing, or even liberals, they say they care about defending democracy. But when they have to choose, they let the autocrats run the show. Putin, Trump, Netanyahu, but also we have them, Orban, and the lack of action from von der Leyen and the European institutions. It is complicity. And when you dismantle democratic institutions, they are maybe be deficient. But if you don't defend them and you don't try to improve them, they are being undermined. And the rule of law, including international law, is totally undermined today. There are a number of illegal wars going on. And I think the answer from us as a political response must be to defend and also to deepen international law and respect for democratic institutions. So that's one of the things that we are set out to do, and that's why it's so important also with how do we democratize the economy. And I think we've had some ideas today, but it will mean different things whether you're a local politician, you're a national politician, or you're working in the European Parliament. We will continue to do that piece of work within the European Left Alliance to make sure that we take an agenda of democratizing the economy. And what does it mean? We have one of the Nordic party leaders wrote a book about Nordic socialism. I know Pelle Dragstedt. I can recommend it. It is different. It's view of how can we organize socialist pockets of the economy and the functioning of our societies. It's in a way in housing sectors, in social security, etc. I think it's very interesting and important that we make the space for having that exchange. I also want to thank Todd for for your presentation about democracy as a core for the trade union movements. I think it's about the workplace, but it's about the bigger picture and how do we make sure that our view of democracy is, it's totally embedded in the workers' movement and workers' union, and the democracy that actually comes from the trade unions. So thank you for that, and we will be part of deepening that reflection and action. Finally, I want to say something about feminist and anti-racist analysis and action. I think several of the contributors have spoken about that. It's part of the way the ELA parties, the European Left Alliance parties, work. Jean-Luc Mélenchon used the word supremaciste. I think it's very interesting. We are not speaking like that in the Nordic countries, but I'll take it with me and maybe we can speak about it differently. But it's clear that the feminist and anti-racist analysis and action is a pillar that underpins our political action. Because it's not a cultural thing. It is material and it shapes the economy and the democracy and what we can do together to counteract these 5, 10, 100 men that try to destroy this world that we are having in front of us. So that's just also a promise from our side that we will also work on those issues. Finally, I think what is so great about having a think tank is that we can get ideas. And I can say, I'll take this because that might work in Umeå, and this might work in another, in Milan or something. Because that is, what a think tank can be about. We are here to build alternatives and to set collective action in motion. We are also here to grow. The left is here to grow, and we will do that together. And in the end, we will also have people in power and make possible the power of the people. So thank you very much for this foundation. It's just the start of a journey. We will be part of it. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. We are going to conclude, but we also have some plans ahead. So I will invite Marisa Matti to come, our Secretary General, who will present our roadmap so far.
Thank you so much. I promise I'll not take long because it has been a wonderful afternoon with a lot of important ideas to be debated. So I'm going now to just tell you a little bit about the roadmap for 2026, and by that I want to also to say a few things about the foundation. You are here all together in the launch event, and of course we want to thank you all for coming here. Some of you from different countries, so it's really nice having you here. But we didn't talk much about the foundation. That's my role here, and I really hope to be brief. So Romain, I'll try to work with this. Yes? No? What did I do? Patience. Oh, thank you. Yes, Roman told me it's just to press next, and it works. Thank you. It was really complex. So, who are we? In terms of our identity, you already know it was told, several of the people who were here, that we are a Brussels-based think tank. We are affiliated with the European Left Alliance for the People and the Planet. You have the chance to, okay, not the plane, the planet. Sorry. But okay. And you had the chance to hear from Katarina and from Malin, the two co-chairs of the ILA party. And it's really nice that after 2 years we have the party and we have the foundation now. It was a lot of work of a lot of people, but here we are. So our core pillars is that we are dedicated to leading intellectual research and popular education through 3 axes: skills, ideas, and inspiration. Also, we will try to do so by engaging scholars, NGOs, public entities, civil society organizations, via conferences, field trips, and research publications, and specializing training. For that, I'll give you one idea of the type of activities we are going to do in these categories. And also what we want an inclusive transnational space committed to the battle for social justice, feminism, anti-racism, peace, and a just ecological transition. So in our activities, and of course I'm not going to talk about any of it in detail, but just you have an idea, and we can meet throughout this path, throughout 2026, hopefully. So we'll have several activities, as I said, major seminars and public debates, not only the launch event as we are here now, but also Safeguard Democracy in Digital Era conference in Stockholm, an European Cities and Financial Capital conference in Paris, and also talk about the challenges of the left in Warsaw. We also want to dedicate our activity not only to the future, but also to the memory, the history, and the geopolitics. It was already spoken today, but we have also prospects and projects to have these activities. To talk about slavery in colonies in Réunion, we want to talk about the future of geopolitics in Paris, rebel memory in Madrid or Valencia or both, and also we want to discuss the 50 years of the Portuguese Constitution in Lisbon, where we are celebrating this year the 50 years after we had an amazing revolution, and we hope to keep defending the democracy. Also, we want to dedicate to research and publications. A lot of work to be done on that, and just as examples, we are planning to have policy papers on red and green policies, but also democratic comeback notebooks to work with activists and journalists, and also something on the history of cost of living struggles. There's something that we are organizing for Paris concerning these areas. But I said it's not only about studies and conferences and seminars. It's also about festivals and community engagement, and for that we have also activities planned. Just to give an example, the International Economic Festival in Paris. Arraial dos Cravos is the party of the carnations. In Lisbon, you know that the carnation is the flower of the Portuguese Revolution, and also the Zobdoc, which is a film festival around documentaries on resistance to fascism and the rights, the defense of and fight for rights. And finally, we also have activities linked to field work and training, because we need to learn and we need to vision and we need to discuss and engage with different actors. When we say we want to merge, we want to be in the bridge between the academics and also the people who work and the activists and also the NGOs. We really wanted to put it in practice. So with field work, we are thinking about housing issues field trip, which is a major issue at the European level in different countries, but also to think about voter mobilization, not only in Europe, but outside Europe, also in the United States, for instance, and the right to housing campaign and summer camp with youth and other activities. countries. So this is basically, in a broad perspective, of course, you can find our activities on our website. You would not need me to be here presenting you, but it's good that we can see each other and we can exchange views on this. So, of course, you'll be all invited to be part of this path that we are just starting now. When we decided to create the foundation, as I said, linked to the ILA party, of course, we want to do much more than just a list of events. We want to think ourselves as a strategic, and think our activities as a strategic roadmap to help consolidate progressive power across the continent. We want to have a robust network of partners, and I must tell you, it's really nice that almost everyone we invited to be here today, they appeared. So it's thank you. Thank you for coming and wanting to be part of this with us. We are very happy with it. We want to work with civil society and NGOs and trade unions and all sorts of movements. And also we want to help consolidate the left wing through the way we can think together with other people, and also having the help of those who dedicate their lives to think these issues. So basically this is our main aims for this year, also granting that we have some generational continuity. We also have the engagement of the youth activists throughout Europe. Saying this and having this presentation very short, I invite you all to follow our activities. More than that, I invite you all to take part in our activities, to be part of the way we want to build ourselves. We still don't know everything. We are just starting. In fact, we don't know much of, but we want to do it not alone, but with the company of all of you. And so thank you so much for coming here, some of you from other European countries. Thank you so much to all the speakers and commentators and invitees that accepted this challenge to be in this event with us, all the participants that registered and came effectively here. Also, we want to thank to the ILA and ILA office and the amazing people in the ILA office in Brussels for all the help. We want to thank also to Rosa Luxemburg Stiftung and the help they gave, and especially allow me to thank Lance Bradley, and also the board members, Lee, Clemence, and all the members of the foundation who were working so we could have this launch event. Just a few extra minutes. I would need to thank some of the people, especially Romain Chipala, for the patience dealing with all this. I want to thank also David and Ilan. David is there from the venue, and the technicians, all the workers who were here helping us today. Also, the amazing ladies in the catering services and all their support. And I also want to thank Panayota and Elisa and last-minute help by, for instance, bringing water to the speakers while I was totally forgetting about it, and other activities which were really relevant as well. And finally, to those we are not seeing in this room, the interpreters, but they are there, they are working, and they are letting us speak in different languages. We were not only here, there were a lot of people following us in the different platforms. So for those who are outside here, thank you also for following this. And this is just the start. Thank you for starting with us. Thank you. Bye.
Thank you, Marisa.
Let's go for the cocktail.
Hang on. But also we really have to thank Marisa, because she did a lot of unseen work behind the scenes. And I would also like to thank Mette Bloch Hansen, who bravely co-hosted this event, and also she has birthday today. So, enjoy the evening.